Throughout this series on the Orruk Warclans, we've talked about how the faction as a whole really amplifies its strength with numbers, right? More boys means more fighters, of course, but also a somewhat disproportionate increase in stuff like the Wa magics and the like. Orcs are greater than the sum of their parts, and it behooves all the other factions in the game to try and stop this snowball effect that always seems to happen as war clans battle and draw more to them. But what about this? What if you had, say, a shortcut? A way to have reinforcements appear without the need to be rallied. A war boss doesn't need to come to your region to call you if he, for example, can just teleport you to his banner. Something like that would greatly magnify the power of any particular Orruk Wa, provided that they had enough of a cunning mind to fully take advantage of it. And frankly, that is the premise and the subject of today's video. Orcs that are able to draw people to their banners, right, other destruction factions to them without having to physically go to a location to call them in. My name is Doug with 2+ Tough, and today we are talking about some murky business, which is a short story that appears in the new Orruk Warclans battletome for 4th edition. So let's start with the core text here. In an ancient Zoctian mine, the Ironjawz of the Far Stampas uncover a peculiar relic, the Murkspore Menhir. The idol, enveloped in perpetual gloom, occasionally pulses an ominous green, at which point the patterns carved across it glow brightly. The gloom coils before belching out shadow-fleshed squigs and pale grot loons. So addled, they seem unconcerned about being suddenly wrenched away from their distant lair. The significance of discovering a portable, if one-way form of realm gate goes over the orc's head. Instead, they hit on a more practical use for their idol, and the annoying little gits that it spawns. Strapping the menhir and the other glowy rocks to shaggy fur beasts that roam the plains, the orcs ride up to a nearby strongpoint and wait for the idol to pulse into life. The Ironjawz are delighted to find that the squigs eagerly bound over the walls to chew through the gate chains and panic defenders, letting the orcs get inside to start crumpin' with far less hassle. That is the story, and off the bat we can see there are a few standout, topics to discuss. First of all, the Murkspore Menhir. What the heck is this? First of all, let's get a mental picture of this thing. A menhir, in case you didn't know, because I did not either, is another word for a standing stone. A tall, vertical rock that typically dates in our own world from the early Bronze Age. But the name Murkspore makes me think, honestly, of a fungus, right? Imagine like a club fungus just blown up to, 8 feet tall to the point where it looks like a standing stone. I imagine it's that tall, but it has to be big to be noticeable, but also transportable. So it has to be something that's not like the size of a bus or something like that. The idea we get from the clues in this short story is that it seems to almost be a one-way realm gate to Ulgu, or some location that is just absolutely drenched in Ulgu magic. And I say that specifically because it seems like Ulgu, if you don't know, is the realm of shadows. That seems to be the defining feature for a lot of the stuff that comes out of this particular artifact. It's wreathed in a pseudo-mist, a cloak of darkness, and it seems inconsistent in its function, meaning it pulses occasionally instead of rhythmically. It's not really reliable in terms of when it'll cough out a whole bunch of gits and squigs and stuff like that, but it does seem to happen regularly. Now, a scholar in this setting, right, if we were to be like a Hessian scholar found this thing, they would bombard this thing with questions and research, right? Is there a minimum or maximum number that it will teleport? What is the exact sequence of these pulses? Does it happen more or less when the glowy rocks are near it? Right? All of these are fantastic questions that we will never get answers to because the first ones to find it were orcs. Regardless, the existence of a one-way realm gate that doesn't function as a realm gate consistently is highly interesting at a time in the lore where realm gates are being used to change the landscape in the Hour of Ruin. I mean, that event, when Skavendom explodes a whole bunch of stuff in Akshi, is because they chain demoed several realm gates. So, could they use this? That's a fascinating question. Pivoting to the character of our story, the Far Stompas, sadly, we don't know much about them. They're obviously Ironjawz. They were found in the Ironjawz story section here. And I tried looking up the Zoctian mine, but I could not find any maps that I have saved that have a picture of it. So if you have one, if you know where this is, like what realm it's in, please leave in the comments down below. I'll pin it. Point is, we don't actually know where this story was happening. The only thing I can tell you is it's presumably not Ulgu, because all the shadow squigs it spits out seem out of place. But I wanted to highlight the actual orcs in this story because it emphasizes the kind of cunning that the Ironjawz can do, even though they are not the cunning faction within the battletome. Typically that's associated with the Cruel Boys. But these Ironjawz, they saw a weird thing and they were like, there's gotta be a way to use this, right? Or even they were smart enough to be like, there's gotta be something here. But they aren't bright enough to do the research we talked about earlier, right? The stuff you'd want to know to make this an effective weapon. And what I like about this is that the Far Stompas didn't see it as a weapon, right? Or even weapon applications for it. They saw it as a lockpick, which is a whole different perspective that I adore. Hey, this thing randomly spits out squigs and gits that we can use, and they can do things that we can't, like say, for example, pop over walls. I love it, because the Ironjawz are thinking, we're not even looking at this as a weapon because we don't need weapons. We are the weapons, right? We are the orcs. But a can opener, now that would be nice. And that's exactly what this thing becomes. A powerful can opener for a particular group of orcs to use in rampaging. Now, I really would love to know what realm this is supposed to be in, because I like the idea of just this warband running around and no one's really quite sure who all is following them. Sometimes it would look like it's just an Ironjaw warband. Sometimes it would look like a Gloomspite Gitz army just rolled out of Ulgu with some Ironjawz with them. All the reports would be inconsistent. What they can do would be inconsistent. It would just be a lot of fun to read reports of trying to understand what kind of Wa is actually rolling through your section of the realms. Now, there's not a lot to this story, honestly. A lot of these short stories, they're more just inspiration for fun ideas for army designs or fun encounters that you can have. This would be a super fun one to do in 4th, where basically, imagine if you had an Ironjawz player versus a City Sigmar player, and maybe on the first turn or two, you get a free unit of squigs, and they just disappear because Ulgu, shadow stuff. Just to get in there and get some bites in, I don't know, weird stuff like that. I love little things like this. And so I'd like to pivot now to talking about why is this cool. Because even though it's just a short paragraph long story, or story pitch rather, in the battletome, I like the idea that it adds a little something to this world. Somewhere, lost to all the major players, seems to be a way to have a one-way teleportation plan set up. If it is a spore, right, we talked the Merc spore is what it's called, can it reproduce? Can you make a fleet of them? There's so many fascinating questions that could make compelling novels, but the orcs find it, ensuring that it'll be used for fun instead of a grander scale evil, like say if Archaon had discovered it. And I was reading this story and I was like, okay, but what is it? Right? I was really racking my brain trying to come up with explanations over what this thing could possibly be. And I'm going to give you mine, right? This is the Doug Conspiracy Corner. I want to hear your explanations for what this could be. The idea that I came up with is, wouldn't it be hilarious if back in Ulgu, Malekith, or Malarian, who we haven't really been introduced to yet formally, got tired of his hills and mountains being infested with Skaven and Gits. So, he creates his own version of what is essentially a pest control box. If you've never seen those, it's a little box you put in the corner and then mice run inside of it and then they get stuck in there and die, but they're out of sight kind of a thing. The elves have built multiple contraptions of all kinds of strange designs that they have spread and share across the realms and their allies and stuff. And so what if this is a contraption by him, he throws it down, and when enough squigs surround it, poof, it glows, and they're all of a sudden thrown somewhere else. Where? Who cares? That's the kind of recklessness that elves are great for, right? It's not my problem. Now, I like this theory because, one, It just seems pessimistic enough for the elves. But it also explains why it's so inconsistent. The trap doesn't go off unless there's enough squigs and gits around the thing. It seems like a perfectly egotistical way to deal with your rat problem, or your, I guess, pest control problem, and making it everybody else's problem. And the other idea that I had, and this one, you're going to want to take a big rip from your vape on this one. What if in addition to the realm gates that tie the realms together, there was essentially a series of fungus that did something similar, but it's all one way? Like an etheric mycelium structure. And so one of these weird shroom towers pops up, right? The standing stone style of things. And because of that structure, the etheric mycelium, it kind of binds all the realms together. And so every once in a while, something near one stone will get spit out into the other, and so forth. And the difference in those two ideas being, one is artificial, meaning it's a trap that was made by the elves. So there's a design there. But the other one being more organic. This is just a thing that happens, and we would have discovered this natural occurrence, but unfortunately, none of the main factions who would do research were the ones to find it. And that idea of, like, I call it the etheric mycelium, it's not really that crazy of an idea when you think about the idea of, like, world roots and stuff like that within the Sylvaneth. It's not far beyond the possibilities there. And stories like this go into making the Orcs such a fun faction because, again, think about what your faction would do if you don't play Orcs, what they would do with something like this. You know, I think about my Slaves to Darkness, and they could just get continuous reinforcements of gits and squigs that they use as slave labor. Or they would ruthlessly try to find the other end, like where are these things coming from, so that they can manage a one-way portal for reinforcement reasons. There would be factions that want to know how to suppress it, like can we control the magic and the glowy stones to like shut down transportation so we have fewer things to worry about. The equivalent of like closing realm gates or securing them just so you don't have to worry about things in your backline. There's a lot of directions that factions can go. If you're a Skaven, can you blow it up? I mean, there's going to be a whole wave of experiments just trying to see, can we chain detonate these things just like we do with the others? Also, if I blow this up, does it blow up the other end where it came from? If I find where the other end came from and I blow that up, does the explosion happen here? Because then we can just drop this giant spore thing into a city and then detonate it like a bomb. And ultimately, that's why I find the story fun, is like the writers created this very strange artifact that on itself is somewhat neutral. Obviously, it spits out squigs and gits, which are, you know, much more reticent to be friendly to orcs and other gits. But like it's just this weird natural phenomenon that in the hands of any faction would create an interesting story and pose interesting questions about how they would use it, how to perceive it, I guess try to research it, which are the kind of stories that I love. I love when there's just a MacGuffin, so to speak, that is enough to make everyone go, what would I do with that? A little bit of faction reflection, if you will. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. I think the Stormcast, honestly, would probably just try to shut it down. My two factions that I own right now are Slaves to Darkness. I already talked about them. I think the Stormcast would either just research it to try and create their own one-way teleporters. But we already have those. So I think they would be like, well, let's just shut it down and make sure that we're the only faction that has them, or fewer factions have something like that. That's my take, but I would love to hear yours. Leave the comments down below. Again, please let me know if you can find something about the Zoctian mine. I would love to hear about that. It would provide a lot of color to the rest of the story, getting a nice idea of where it's all happening. Regardless, I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Happy wargaming, friends!